I've not seen one go down. Okay, so what's happened is since they put like Amazon and some of those on sales tax now, that is just really, COVID was unbelievable how the government's made money on sales tax. And then you also have sales tax for streets, and we'll talk about that in the staple document here in just a little bit. But you generated 81, it'd be the last line there, 81 through 81, and I'm not sure in that one why it went to 77. I mean, it's not material for audit, but that's something when we do the budget, we'll try to figure out why it dropped. It's 1% is what you receive on sales tax for streets. And I don't remember off the top of my head what year that was started, but that would have been, was that when you were working on the streets, like the center of the streets around town? I don't remember.
I'm sure.
Yeah, okay.
That was before my time.
Yeah. Well, Jan Milby, who worked for me for 32 years, was the one that did the budget here for many years, but she retired on me, so I lost some of my knowledge there. Okay, the rest of these funds, the only other one I was going to show you is on page 15, and we'll talk about this in the budget part of it here. But this is what's called the Special City County Highway Fund. And this is where it looks like you've elected to transfer that right at 80,000 of sales tax into this fund to do streets and roads, okay? And the reason being is this fund can only be spent for streets and roads on that state of Kansas gas tax. You can't spend this fund on that gas tax part. You can't spend it on anything else but streets, curb and guttering, and anything that's connected. Like some situations you might go to use sidewalks, because it's built into the curb and guttering, okay? But we'll talk about that more later. Page 18 was the ARPA funds. We already talked about that. You've got the 106,000 there. And then we'll talk about the sewer and water a little bit when we talk about the budget here. Anyway, last page 23, I didn't explain an agency fund. So on Schedule 3, what an agency fund is money that you collect for other people, okay? So like on page 23, payroll clearing, that is money that is still sitting there. Like what happens there is the net check of the employees goes in there, all the taxes go in there, and it's a great control because when it's all said and done, it should be zero when all the checks clear, okay, for payroll. Sales tax clearing. It's where you pay sales tax in for your utilities, the ones that have sales tax on utilities. Some of them are exempt, but some haven't. That's what that is. And then I'm not sure what the penalty clearing fund is without going back to the work papers. But maybe there was a penalty on something in the past, and it's just been clearing there because it looks like it's been. Maybe a penalty on the utilities. People paying. I'll have to look, but I'll bet you that's where it is. It's where they pay penalty, and she's just running it through here. But it's $4,000. I mean, I'm not saying that's not a lot of money. I'm just saying it's not a lot of money in this case. Okay, that's the audit report. Any questions? It's pretty cut and dry. Your audit report is your size of cities like Galvin, yours, even Marion. Marion's is a little more complicated, but most of the cities of your size are pretty straightforward. Okay?
So how is ours overall financial health compared to other cities of our size?
That's what we're going to talk about. Okay. So the staple document is what we'll go to next. The second staple document. Well, I let that cleared up. Okay. So before I get into this document, Scott, right?
Yes.
Okay. Scott and I talked about this quite a bit. And then at one point, I think I was so wound up trying to explain all this, I had him for an hour on the phone. He goes, why don't we carry on this conversation at the audit report?
I said, no accountant, you just went over my head.
Okay, so the way, I started doing this about 20 years ago because there's no credit line for you as a city, okay? So the cash, the unencumbered cash that you carry in your funds is very important, especially the general fund. Because the way the state statute goes is the general fund can pay for any expenditure in your city, okay? So if another fund runs out of money or you need more money, the general fund can pay for even debt. So you want to make sure your general fund's healthy. So my dad, this is for, Daisy, credit, you remember this now?
I love this scenario.
Yeah, okay, so my dad, when I left for college, he goes, now, Scott, I'm gonna get you a credit card, and this is early 1980, 79, okay? I don't even know if credit cards did exist, but they weren't very much used. But he's a banker, so he's trying to get my credit built up, okay? But he said, you know, when you get out, you gotta make sure you have the emergency fund built up, and you probably all older people here have probably heard that, built up, that you have 3 to 6 months of emergency money in case, you know, something bigger goes out your house. Now, I don't know that they teach that anymore, but that's the way that I grew up, okay? Well, I was sitting one day, and this sounded exciting. I was on my mower in Galva. I thought this would be really a cool scenario to do for governments because they can't borrow. You know, they can't. And so this would be a great way to see what those cash balances would be. So about 20 years ago, I started doing this for governments. And I teach it all over the state, and it's actually taken off because it's easy for a council or a city clerk or anybody to understand it, okay? So that's what we're going to talk about, where the city of Canton is tonight, okay? On 12/31/23. So if you look on page 1 here, if you look at the expenditure column, it's 4 from the right or 3 from the left, you see expenditures. Now, I don't want to get too far in the weeds here, but the reason it's called expenditures is it includes encumbrances, okay? And what an encumbrance is that 12/31/23, if you have, accounts payable is pretty common in the business world. So accounts payable would mean you would have an invoice, you have the goods in hand in December, but then you don't pay for it till January. That's an accounts payable. Encumbrance is different. It might be something that you even put in the minutes and say, we're going to enter into a contract with a construction company in December, and it's going to be done, it's going to be paid for in February or March because it's encumbered. And you're trying to use last year's budget and use it up before you go any further. Some people don't understand that, but if you would sign a contract, let's just use some numbers here. If you had $100,000 in your fund, let's just say it's Special City Highway, that's a great one. You have $100,000 in that fund, but you sign a contract for $125,000, you just violated cash basis law. And that's why that encumbrance is there, and it's there from 1933. I have the statute book in my office over in Galva. It's 33 when the Great Depression hit, because Kansas is literally the most conservative state financially in the state of Kansas. I mean, in the whole United States, okay? So if you sign a contract of anything like that, except for services, but like contract for building streets or building, you have to make sure you have money there in the fund. If you go general obligation bonds, like what was done on the school, probably about, I don't know when that was, 13, 14, whenever, when they did the gym and all that. Now that's a different story. You can actually go and get the bonds, 8.3 million or whatever it was at that time, and you can actually spend for that because you have a bond issue in place. But if you don't have bond issue, lease purchase, you don't want no fund warrants, because no fund warrants is when you're out of money, okay? So in this case here, you would have unencumbered cash in the city of Canton. You look at the third column from the right, that's at $1,344,140, okay? You see that in the third column on the right? The next column over is the accounts payable encumbrances, okay? So what this means is that column is subtracted from your cash in the bank. That's the right-hand column. So that's why you're trying to be as conservative as possible and say, these are expenses that we have, or we're going to say that we're going to spend for, but we're not going to outlay the cash until maybe February or March because of the encumbrance law. Does that make sense? I don't know. That's pretty quick, but that's how it works. So what I do on this statement is the expenditure column. You'll see it's divided by 12. 952,799 is divided by 12. 79,400. So for 2023, your average expenditures across the board by month were 79,400. You see that? Then I multiply it times 3 right below that. That's 238,000. I multiply it by 2 That gets us to 6 months, that's 476,400. If you look to the left, you'll see the 1,344,000 divided by 79,400, which is the average monthly expenditures. You have 17 months of cash sitting in the city of Canton. You are not in trouble. Do you understand? You're not in trouble. Okay, I want to make sure I'm clear on that because I had a couple phone calls, okay? They're not in trouble. Now, how you use that 17 months is another story, okay? But what I'm saying is you've got 17 months, okay? Then what I do is right below that, I take that same 1,344,140 and back out the capital type funds. So I backed out special highway, I backed out special equipment, I backed out ARPA, and I backed out special park. That gets you down to 905,754, which is more like probably what your operating funds are. You see what I mean? Those would be money that you would just have to pay your normal monthly bills, okay? Divide that by 79,400, and it's 11.4 months. Now, I have a lot of cities with utilities that have usually somewhere in the 9 to 12 month range, because you have the general fund, you want it healthy, but you also want those utility funds healthy, because if a water line goes out or something messes up, you've got that bill. So 11.4 months that way, and then I went and did just the general fund and utility funds on the right there. So the general fund has 456,000 roughly, and the utility funds have 387. 844,000 divided by that 79.4, it's 10.63. So see, all of them kind of fit that same category. So that's the question I get more than any one thing on little cities or cities, the smaller cities, is do I have enough cash? Okay? So I'm showing you here at 12/31, unless you guys just went crazy the last 3 months, you have enough cash. Okay? What we're going to talk about in the budget, though, is how do we allocate that cash to get the most bang for your buck for what you're wanting to accomplish. Okay? So I was going to try to be done in an hour to hour and 15 minutes. Is that, unless you have questions? I don't want to like. Okay. So the next page is something I started this year, page 2. If you click on that, it says, and this could be anybody here if they wanted to, okay? But I started doing this because I started doing the city of Pratt last year because I can't find a finance director. So I am doing it, kind of winging it, because I'm outside the city, but they have a lot going on, and I'll explain how that might relate to you on the utility funds, okay? Things that we need to maybe look at. But what this is, I've now asked every one of the bigger ones I do this question. List out 5 top budget challenges for 2025. This could be any challenge from the department head, meaning like, let's just say the maintenance supervisor, police, in your case, or anybody here that you're operating the city. The commission, I put commission because it was Pratt, I'm sorry, I should have changed it to council. From the citizens, or from a visionary perspective to move Canton, Kansas into 2030. See, what happens is so many people look and go, how in the world am I going to spend to even pay for this right now? And that's true, you need to pay your bills. But you've got 17 months of cash sitting there, so how are we going to look at here's what we pay to operate every month. What are we going to do to allocate that other money to start putting it forward or paying it for, whatever those 5 things are you think. And it doesn't have to be 5, it could be 3. So I'm not doing it here, but you can if you want. On the big ones I do, I actually have them turn them into me. There's Pratt has 23 department heads, okay? And they have a lot going on, okay? So I have them turn them into me, and that's how I start kind of figuring out how to talk to the commission, saying, what should we put in priority? And you'll see what I mean here in just a minute, okay? So that's one thing I put in here. The next one, is it okay to mention Galvin here? Just kidding. I moved here 86 years ago. In 1986, sorry. It's the same as what Sedan and Caney, Kansas would be. They can't, they have trouble. Anyway, the reason I put Galvin here because it is literally a great example for the capital improvement fund, okay? And here's why. I tell this story across the state. Wayne Ford, when he was the mayor for 42 years. 26 years, let's see, I would have been here about, 86. He started talking to me in 91-ish, probably. And Phil Lacey, which some of you may know, may not know, but he was an attorney with Gilmore and Bell, and used to live in McPherson. He died of cancer early. But what happened is we had a little powwow. So Phil Lacey was the Gilmore and Bell, so that was the attorneys that helped fund the bond issue. Figure out the bond issue. Wayne would go out and get the contract, and he kind of took grief for not having curb and guttering at first. But if you go down most streets in Galva, they're all concrete, okay? So we made ditches. We did not do curb and guttering. And what we would do, there's a statute in third-class cities, which you are. It's called the main traffic statute, and main traffic way statute. And what that does is we took a little risk, but we maxed the debt to the debt level of the city of Galvin. Okay, and we had a pretty aggressive payoff of 7 years. And so he would get a contractor, and I think at that time it might have been King Construction back before they sold the Hutton. But he just had a deal. They would bid it, but this guy would do. Mr. King, Mike King would say, "This is what it's going to cost to do 15 blocks," and then we would debt it up to the maximum. And then over 7 years, we pay that down. And then he would have them come back in. It took us 26 years to do that. And the reason I tell that story across Kansas is because we have what I call the microwave approach to finance and running a city. And the microwave approach doesn't really work because it's you're managing for right now because it's your people. Some of you are more experienced like I am, okay? But I attached an article to the back of this that says you should look at your debt level and your cash over the next 10 years and figure out which projects should be done right now because it actually works for the older generation and it works for the younger generation. But if it works for the next 10 years for the younger generation, maybe debt should be used for that, okay? And this article, you'll see it here. I'm not going to read it, but there's some points that I want to make because I'm making them with everybody in the state of Kansas. If you want your communities to thrive, and Argo was where I really worked on these counties I worked with, is how do you get young couples to come to your county? How do you get young couples to come to your city? Well, you have to have the things that they want to use. So if you told me at 50, I'm 63, I started Lilly Group at 60. If you'd have told me at 55 I was going to start a firm from scratch because nobody wanted to do government, I told you were crazy. But you know what? I now have 16 employees. They're virtual. I have nobody in Galva. I'm the only one in my office, and everybody else lives around the state of Kansas, and one lives in Denver. Okay? And she used to work for me. And so you kind of just have to start thinking outside the box. So I've been challenged in these communities to do that. So you have fiber optics. Do you have, how can somebody work virtually in your town? Or how can you attract people to your community? And that was what was happening at the bank in Sedan. It was in a bad situation, and we went through it, got it sold, and that was during COVID, and I think there were 10 young families that moved back to Sedan. If you know anything about Sedan in Chautauqua County, where I grew up, it's the poorest county in the state of Kansas. And it hurts, This is back in the day when the jeans had holes in them, but it wasn't because it was popular, it's because that's all they had. Okay. So, to get back on this page right here, what this does is this shows Galva the challenges we have. So Andy Bruce just became the supervisor last summer. So he and Lori and I sat down for 3 hours and went through and put these potential projects on the left-hand side. You see that with the circle? And this is kind of like at home. When you start listing out all the things you've got to fix, it kind of scares you, okay? but I'll give you an example. So if you go down to, because this happened to me, if you look at line 31, new electric poles, 20 per year, there's 100 of them that are bad in the city of Galvin, okay? Andy told me, there's 100 of them bad. It says here 3,000 each, but that's probably now closer to 5,000 to 6,000 each, okay? So just the electric poles in Galva are right at 600,000, okay? We're just probably 600,000. And they have electric, you don't, but I mean, I'm just saying, it could be water pipe, it could be anything. But then Andy hollered at me one day, because he lives right across the street from me, he goes, I saw a BPU in my yard over there. I go, what's going on? So I go over there to see what's going on, and he took his shovel and put the shovel all the way through the pole that holds up the transformer and everything in my backyard, okay? There was nothing underneath it. The lines were the only thing holding it up. I said, okay, Andy, I see what you're saying. So that pole cost, because it had a few more connections, that was $6,000 for that pole. And that, I'm just using that as an example because what I'm trying to get cities to do is sit down and do this very thing right here. Then what I did is I went to the council after those three of us talked about all these things here. Then I went to council for another 2 to 3 hours. And we went through this very thing, okay? Because water right now is a problem, okay? If you look at column, now this was done last summer, I've not updated it yet for this year, but if you look at column E 2025, look at the bottom number after 2025, after we put in these various projects that they would need to get done. It's a negative 310,000, and that's probably very, very conservative. It's probably more than that. You see what I'm saying? But I think some people are afraid to sit down and do this because they don't want to know what that number is, okay? But you can see here, we did water improvements, electric improvements, building an office, street improvements, maintenance facilities, parks, and equipment. And we've listed out everything here, and then what you do is you spread it over the next 7 years, and you figure out what's most important to get done right now that you need, and what needs to be replaced in the next 7 years, and then you have a plan. So as you transfer that 80,000 to special highway, you have a plan how to do the streets, okay? If you transfer to special equipment, you don't just go and burn through the special equipment fund. You go, oh, on my plan here, the next piece of equipment is this, okay? So, I'll give you an example. These, oh, God, I can't think of the name. But anyway, he used it over in my yard. It's those vacuum trucks. Well, a vacuum truck is like very expensive, okay? And I guess they break down a lot. But we found this trailer that works, a vacuum trailer. It works off a trailer, and it was a used one, and I've never seen one work. So we were putting something in right by the water line there by my bridge there, and it's pretty amazing. And I didn't have to worry about, hitting the lines. I didn't have to worry about hitting anything. So sometimes you have to adjust. That trailer probably only cost $20,000 or $25,000 instead of hundreds of thousands. Now, I'm not going to belabor that anymore, but that's what that is. Okay, so the next page is blank. Okay? The next page is Canton, Kansas, and I'm not putting anything in here because you don't have a capital improvement fund. But it's something that I really think you should look at and try to build, okay? And it's not going to happen overnight. Just like that 26 years of putting concrete streets in. When I moved to Galva, they were all sand. We couldn't even open our windows because the sand was so bad when kids went around the street right south of my house, they would just let her rip and the house would be full of dirt. So it's something that you've got to start somewhere. I just tell people that. You've got to start somewhere. So what this means here when it says pages 25 to 35, just flip back here a minute and I'll show you what this is. So this is an article I found about a month ago when I started doing these trainings at these bigger cities and counties. And it's on page 25, and it's called Capital Planning, and it's a county in North Carolina. And a county is not that much different than a city. There's just different things you're going to be planning for, but the concepts are still there. So the state statute says when you set up a capital improvement fund, you shall have a 5-year plan in place. And what I interpret, I'm not an attorney, but that's an Excel spreadsheet, okay? I mean, because there's really, in a small city, you're not going to go write some elaborate plan because all it's going to be is on the shelf. But that Excel spreadsheet, if you just keep that updated, and it might change every month or two. You know, there might be something that moves from 27 to 25 because all of a sudden you've got an emergency. You see what I'm saying? But you've got to start somewhere building that, okay? So this here article is really good. Establish a long-term vision. I'm just going to kind of flip through here. They have checkpoints along that. If you go to page 29, I've written all over this, but cash versus debt. Remember I told you how much do you fund with cash and how much do you look to fund with debt, and seeing where that's at. This here is probably one of my favorite parts on page 30. Institutionalized long-term thinking. I've got it circled on page 30. You go down here to the department head involvement, and this is something that we went through very, very detailed in Pratt. I'm going to read this one section for you. If you go down kind of that middle of that, let's see here, it's department, starts with departments. It's about the third paragraph in. Departments can submit any new capital requests that are not in the plan. Departments are also invited to identify Wake County's what they call horizon issues. I've never seen that before. Because see what happens is you go to any place, it's kind of like at home. Well, I have a wish list, okay? I wish I had that, but what do you really have to have right now? And what they're calling the wish list is the horizon issues, which are projects that are not included in the capital improvement fund because they do not, and this is very important, they do not have a funding source, okay? So think about that. You might have a project in town, but you don't have any way to fund it, okay? Or sufficiently refined scope, cost, or business case. Those are the four things that they have to meet before they can put one of their projects on that sheet I just showed you. And that makes all kinds of sense. Because, like in Galva, that would have been the funding source would have been the third-class city main trafficway statute, and we could do the bonds without having to go out and go through all the steps of doing public hearings that was just done. And you can't do a cul-de-sac, but you can do mainly any other funds, all right, any other streets. And the one thing we did do is we looked at the streets in town that actually led to, like, the school. Okay, now the school did have, I think, 2 blocks of blacktop. I'm not sure there was the street in front of it, I can't remember. But anyway, we looked at, and that's how we did it. We would look at these streets that needed to be done, and that's how we grouped them all together to make sure it fit. One thing that's really cool about that is Wayne was so passionate about this that when he died of kidney failure, he and I just went blank, his wife, they paid the last block. Isn't that amazing? The last block of concrete personally, because he wanted those streets finished before he died. And that's just an amazing story, but it took 26 years. And most people don't have the patience for 26 years, okay? And then this whole section here is really good to read, because over here on the right is, these are also, making short overviews of why you needed to put this on there. So these bullets, like, what is the problem the department is trying to solve? What will the project serve? And how will they improve services? They're just great questions there to ask. And this could even be, I could see where, like, citizens would come to maybe like a little setup, where you talk about, here's some things we're looking at, what do you think? And I've done that in cities and counties, where we have a session where we have an hour or 2 session where we just go through and actually throw things out and see what works. I'm going to stop there on that part.